Anthony Spectacular Clay had just stepped out of the parole office, the weight of his past still hanging heavy on his shoulders. He was a man with a reputation, a former pimp who had spent years behind bars, navigating the underworld like a king. Now he was out. The world had changed, but Anthony felt that he could still conquer it. After his first meeting with his parole officer, a striking woman named Lila, she was everything a man like him should avoid: professional, intelligent. And yet, there was something about her, something magnetic. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but there was a dark allure to her that he couldn't shake. She'd kept it businesslike during the meeting, but the sparks in her eyes as she signed his papers hadn't gone unnoticed. Anthony knew he'd see her again. A few hours later, Lila had called, inviting him to her apartment for a casual evening. It seemed innocent enough. Two adults, away from the constraints of a professional setting, enjoying a drink, maybe some company. What he didn't know was that she wasn't the woman he thought she was. She was, in fact, a demon, a succubus who lived in the human world under the guise of a parole officer. The weekend at her apartment was a whirlwind of pleasure. Her touch, her whispers, the way she made him feel as though he was the only man in existence, it was intoxicating. Anthony, a man who'd seduced and charmed countless women in his time, found himself completely disarmed. There was an energy about her that he couldn't understand, and he was drawn in deeper with each passing moment. Monday morning, Lila had to leave for work, telling him to relax and stay in the apartment. "I'll be back soon," she had promised, "and I hope you'll still be here when I get back." So, Anthony waited. As the hours ticked by, he grew restless. The apartment, luxurious but eerily quiet, felt suffocating. He scanned the room, looking for something to do. Books, a glass of whiskey. He played with his phone, scrolling aimlessly, but nothing satisfied. Bored out of his mind, Anthony finally decided to head out for a pack of cigarettes. He had been smoking on and off for years, and the craving gnawed at him. He stood up, stretching his legs. As he moved toward the front door, he noticed the silence felt heavier than before. The hallway outside the door seemed darker than it should be, but he shrugged it off. He turned the doorknob. It wouldn't open. He tried again, this time with more force. The lock clicked, but the door didn't budge. Strange, maybe the lock was jammed. He twisted the knob again, harder, but it felt as though the door was locked from the other side. There was no way it was stuck. It had opened just fine when Lila had left. His mind raced. Maybe the apartment was just one of those weird places with faulty locks. He turned the deadbolt and tried again. Nothing. Panic began to settle in. He tried pushing, pulling, every angle possible, but it wouldn't open. It felt wrong. His heart began to pound. He thought about calling Lila, but then the phone slipped from his hand as he saw something out of the corner of his eye. A flicker of shadow, something unnatural in the periphery. Anthony took a step back, his instincts screaming at him. He scanned the apartment, eyes darting to every corner. The shadows felt deeper. He couldn't explain it, but the apartment itself seemed to be closing in on him, as though it was alive. The walls pulsed with a strange energy, like a heartbeat. Suddenly, the room felt colder and he shivered. He was no longer sure if the walls were real, or if he was trapped inside some twisted version of reality. His mind raced to make sense of it all. The strange way Lila had behaved, the way she seemed to have an otherworldly allure. Was it possible? Was she more than just a beautiful woman? Was he dealing with something supernatural? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a creaking door. He whipped his head around, heart pounding in his chest. A closet door was opening slowly, but no one was there. He could feel the temperature drop even more, the air growing heavier with every passing second. The shadows seemed to gather, and then he saw it. Her eyes, glowing faintly red in the dim light, a predatory gleam within them. Lila. She was standing in the doorway, her figure illuminated by a strange, ethereal light that made her seem almost unreal. "Did you miss me?" she purred, her voice both soothing and unsettling. Anthony froze, a cold sweat breaking out across his brow. He could feel the pressure of the room tightening around him, and he realized with chilling clarity that Lila was no ordinary woman. The scent of sulfur filled the air, and her smile stretched wider, showing teeth that were just a bit too sharp. "You weren't supposed to leave," she whispered, her voice a hiss of temptation. "But now that you're trapped, it doesn't matter. I have all the time in the world." The door remained closed, and as Anthony backed away, trying to make sense of what was happening, he knew deep down that the real nightmare was only beginning. Anthony Clay's heart hammered in his chest, every instinct screaming for him to run. But where could he go? The front door remained sealed, an unyielding wall between him and freedom. Lila's glowing red eyes pierced through him like twin blades, her smile still that unsettling mix of charm and menace. "Why?" Anthony croaked, his voice shaky as he backed further into the room. "What the hell are you?" Lila tilted her head, her crimson gaze following him like a predator stalking prey. She took a step into the room, the shadows curling around her feet like smoke. The once luxurious apartment now felt suffocating, as though it was breathing with her presence. "What am I?" she repeated, her voice soft, almost teasing. "You already know, Anthony. You can feel it." Her words slithered through the air, and with each syllable, the room seemed to darken, the walls pressing closer. Anthony wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans, trying to keep his composure. He had faced dangerous men in his time, gangsters, killers, men who made their living off violence. But this was something else, something far beyond what he could understand. "I ain't no coward," he said, forcing steel into his voice, though his hands trembled. "You better tell me what this is, or I swear—" "Swear what?" Lila cut him off, her tone mocking, a twisted smirk tugging at her lips. "What will you do, Anthony? You can't threaten what you can't touch." She took another step forward, her movements unnaturally smooth, her presence commanding the space around her. Anthony stumbled back, his eyes darting to the windows. Maybe he could break one, climb out, anything to get away. He grabbed a nearby chair, adrenaline surging, and hurled it at the nearest window. The chair crashed against the glass and bounced back as if the window were made of steel. The sound echoed unnaturally, vibrating through the room. Lila chuckled softly, the sound sending chills up his spine. "There's no way out, Anthony," she said. "Not until I say so." "What do you want?" he shouted, his voice edged with panic. "You brought me here. Why? Just to mess with me?" Lila's smile faltered for the first time, replaced by something far darker. Her eyes narrowed, the red glow intensifying. "I chose you," she whispered, her voice low and dangerous. "You, Anthony Clay, the man who thought he could own women, used them like toys, tossed them aside when he was done. Did you think there would never be a reckoning, that the universe wouldn't balance the scales?" Anthony's blood ran cold. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. "What are you talking about?" he muttered. "That was years ago. I'm done with all that. I paid for it. I did my time." Lila laughed again, but there was no warmth to it now, only mockery and malice. "Your time?" she sneered. "Prison bars may keep the law satisfied, but they don't settle deeper debts. You've sinned, Anthony, and I'm here to collect." He shook his head furiously. "No, no, no, this ain't real. You ain't real." "Oh, I'm real, Anthony," she said softly, her voice dripping with venom. "And so is your punishment." As she spoke, the room shifted again. The walls began to ripple like water, dark veins creeping across their surface. The air grew so heavy that Anthony could barely breathe. He stumbled, falling to his knees, clutching his chest as an icy pain clawed through his lungs. From the corners of the room, shapes began to emerge. Shadows slithered forward, crawling across the floor, forming twisted, human-like figures. Their eyes glowed faintly red, just like Lila's, and their mouths opened in silent screams. "No! No!" Anthony choked, trying to scramble to his feet. The figures advanced, slow but relentless, their hands reaching out as if to pull him into the darkness. Lila stood at the center of it all, watching him with detached satisfaction. "They're the forgotten ones, Anthony. The women you used and discarded. Their pain, their anger, it lingers. And now, it's yours to bear." Anthony's mind raced, desperation clouding his thoughts. He pushed back against the encroaching shadows, his body screaming in protest. "I didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just a kid." "Ignorance doesn't erase guilt," Lila hissed. The shadowy figures closed in, their fingers grazing his skin, cold, burning, draining. He screamed, the sound raw and primal, as if the life were being torn from him inch by inch. Through the haze of pain, Anthony's eyes locked on Lila. "Please," he rasped. "I'll do anything, anything." Lila's smile returned, cruel and calculating. The shadows froze, their grip loosening, as if awaiting her command. Lila approached, crouching before him. Her red eyes bored into his very soul, her voice soft but deadly. "You will serve me," she whispered. "You will be my instrument, my vessel in this world. Do that, and I may let you live." Anthony hesitated, the weight of her words sinking in. Serve her? Be her vessel? He didn't understand, but the alternative, the shadows, the pain, was too much to bear. I'll do it, he whispered, defeated. "I'll do whatever you want." Lila's smile widened, a dark triumph gleaming in her eyes. "Good boy." Lay returned, cruel and calculating. "Anything?" She leaned closer, her lips brushing his ear, as she whispered something he couldn't understand, a language ancient and otherworldly. His body went rigid, his vision darkening as a burning heat spread through his veins. He screamed one final time before the world went black. Anthony awoke hours later, sprawled on the floor of Lila's apartment. The shadows were gone. The walls were normal again, the oppressive atmosphere lifted. He gasped for air, his body aching, his mind reeling. The front door was open. Slowly, Anthony pushed himself to his feet. He stumbled to the door, looking out into the bright hallway beyond. Freedom was just steps away, but he knew it was an illusion. He glanced back at the apartment. It was empty, eerily still, but he could feel her presence, inside him, watching, waiting. He looked down at his trembling hands. They weren't his anymore, not entirely. As Anthony stepped out into the world, the truth settled in his chest like a stone. He was free, but he would never truly escape. Lila owned him now. And wherever she was, whatever she was planning, he knew one thing for certain: he would be the one to carry it out. Part 2 of The Locked Door, coming soon on MRGK.
Miller Harris, Hot Tub Holidays, in store near you, November 5th. You better think a hot tub